Welcome back to Couchin Courtside, you guys. Just like the NBA, we took a little all-star break, but we're back now, and we'll be releasing these things bi-weekly. So I just want to catch up with our other co-hosts here. John, how we doing today?
Johnny, it's a Monday. I'm doing great, man. How you doing today?
Doing pretty good. So we got a lot of things to talk about. I know the all-star game happened yesterday. There's a couple of trade rumors going on that, can change the shape of how we think about it. And I want to revisit a couple of things when it came to our predictions when we started the podcast earlier this year. But before we get all to that, I got something to ask you. So social media has become, big for everybody, right? Whether it comes to Instagram, TikTok. But there's these things out there that kind of bother me. So I want to ask you, what bothers you more? Right-wingers talking about Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss being canceled, or Gen Z trying to cancel Eminem right now?
Wow. If I had to actually say one that's actually more ridiculous, it probably would have to be Potato Head. I mean, come on, man. Mr. Potato Head is an abstract doll that you can basically pick and choose the pieces that you actually want to affix to its face. If you want Mr. Potato Head to have a mustache, he has a mustache. If you want him to have lips, he has lips. Nice eyes or eyelashes, you can change those eyes. What's really interesting to me is I saw a take, and I forget which pundit or writer it was, but they were basically saying that, when the manufacturer of the toy made the Mr. Potato Head, he identified him as a man because he had a mustache. And yet we know that a lot of times people will say, well, just because you identify a certain way doesn't actually make you that way. So to me, just seeing the both sides of that argument is just absolutely ridiculous. I'm not going to lie. I'm not too up on the whole situation with Eminem, but come on. I mean, we all know that Eminem has very offensive lyrics. It's part of the reason why his music to me is kind of in a vault. I don't revisit Eminem as much as I would revisit, say, an Outkast or a Jay-Z, just because he was part of my teen angst period. And I don't know about you in that instance there, but of those two, which do you find more ridiculous?
First off, the people that are getting upset about the brand changing to Potato Head because they're still Mr. Potato, Mrs. Potato. They just changed their branding to Potato Head. And getting mad over Dr. Seuss, the estate themselves, canceling 6 books on their own because it has racist imagery. I don't know what to tell you. I'm pretty sure that's called capitalism, because they figured out that, hey, if we get rid of this, we're going to get more money because they're listening to the people of, when they talk to them. And now they're just getting free press. Let me tell you about this Eminem one, because I didn't, my wife has made me a TikTok user, whatever. I use it. I consume it. But Gen Z is really trying to cancel Eminem for having offensive lyrics. You remember that song that he did with Rihanna?
Yeah.
The Friends with the Monster one? So they're trying to cancel it because the song, which is Eminem warning about abuse, they're taking those words and twisting it about him being abusive. And I'm just I'm very confused at what you guys are doing. First of all, if you're canceling Eminem because of that song, you really have not listened to Eminem.
100%.
You haven't listened to Marshall Mathers. You don't know who you're talking about. Also, Eminem's going to cancel you before anything else happens, because that man has a way with words that I don't believe anyone in the history of rap can do when it comes to those type of things. And it's just funny to see. It's because, we're the millennial generation. Mm-hmm. They tried to cancel Eminem before. We're not having it. And then now this younger generation wants to cancel Eminem. And I'm telling you, we're not having it. Let the man be. Do you really want smoke from Eminem at this point?
Nobody wants smoke from Eminem, man. Eminem is one of the greatest diss and battle rappers probably out there. I mean, he was putting out songs, before Nas put out Ether, about Everlast and Ja Rule and all that stuff. Nobody wants it with Eminem.
Yeah, the fact that a lot of these kids are saying, the last time someone tried to mess with Eminem, Machine Gun Kelly changed to a different genre, right? At this point, he's not rapping anymore.
Right.
But that's short-term memory because you did mention Everlast, Ja Rule. That was like back then. And so I'm, I kind of hope that they keep egging him on so he can just release another track and just end Gen Z altogether. Because, as much as I think Gen Z is actually doing a lot for the future generation, because this is the generation that just, at least the smart ones, they know how to fact check within 5 minutes of whatever statement it is. Better or worse, these guys will not let something get passed by them.
For sure.
Sometimes some of these people just need to learn how to interpret stuff,
Well, not only that, Johnny, but and let us both say this with a full disclaimer: we support you, Gen Z, right? We know how hard it is for younger people these days with college tuition, finding a good job, wanting to buy a house, wanting to have a family. We support you. But as you get older, you recognize that you have to pick your battles. And this is just not the battle that you want to have about Eminem and a song and Rihanna, right? Like you said, Johnny, if this is the song that you found offensive and not Kim off of Marshall Mathers LP, then, I got a problem with that. And maybe it's because of recency bias or something to that effect. But again, this is not the battle that you actually want to have. Let's start talking about things that are actually more pressing for your generation, and so you can have a coalition of people on your side behind you.
Yeah, and like John said, we do support you, but I just want everyone to remember, you guys started using the word stan. I want you to remember where that word came from.
That's right.
You don't have that word without Eminem. Right. There's no way. So let's get on to what happened last night, which is Team LeBron just destroyed Team Durant in the All-Star game. Let me ask you, John. Did you even enjoy yesterday's All-Star festivities?
Well, the festivities, okay. The game was trash. Can we get it out there? Right?
Yeah.
But watching Steph, I was texting you during that 3-point shootout, and my goodness, man, that man is an absolute machine in terms of his form. His form doesn't look intuitive any way, shape, at all. I was going to say form again, but doesn't look intuitive. But just the fact that he's been perfecting it for all these years, and he's just such a sniper from anywhere on the floor. I enjoyed the 3-point contest much more than I enjoyed the actual All-Star game itself. But let me say this: if we're going to talk about a grinds my gear session, who the hell gave them an extra 3 points for that green ball, that money ball? And
Mountain Dew did.
The Mountain Dew ball, and then also. Why the hell did someone, I forgot who was shooting? I think it was Donovan Mitchell who was shooting. He put all of his money balls at the beginning of going around the arc, and I'm like, "Why? You're not warm yet, so why would you choose all your money balls at the beginning? There should be more so towards the middle, to where you're still fresh, but you've warmed up. You're not too tired yet. You should never put those in the beginning." I think he missed 4 out of 5, and it was just like, come on, man, that was just a poor decision. But the game itself, yeah, I mean that was rough.
We'll start from the beginning. The skills challenge was fine. I think, the fact that DeMontis won really does show how skilled he is. I like how the two people that had the bye just kind of got crushed by Vukovic and Sabonis. The 3-point contest is the highlight, simply because of Curry, right? But we look at the contestants out there, and I get it. Silver is trying to throw this thing during a pandemic. But honestly, John, outside of Curry, do the other 5 actually belong there?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because you can't tell me you're not shocked that Michael Conley hit 26 and 27 points respectively.
I am impressed at what Conley did, right? But when we think about 3-point snipers, we usually think about people, at least throughout the year, that are specialists at that, right? Curry's the exception because he's a scorer and a sniper as well. But Jason Tatum, you don't think is a 3-point shooter.
Not at all.
Jaylen Brown isn't a 3-point shooter.
Not at all.
Donovan Mitchell trying to do Larry Bird, and I agree with you. I'm like, you got balls to put your money rack as the first one while keeping your warm-up on. Like, that is, right? You got Conley. He is a shooter, but, I don't even think he would have been there.
Zach
LaVine. First of all, that man, if he was in the dunk contest this year, he would have at least saved halftime for me a little bit. But we'll kind of get through that as well. So it's funny because Curry's just looking at the field, so like I'm just toying with you guys at this point. Like
Pretty much.
I'll miss a couple just for the hell of it, right?
Pretty much. But let me say this though. I thought it was really interesting the fact that this and it probably was done by deliberation, but just the very fact that this is the first time in a long time that I've seen the participants in the 3-point shooting contest were also actually participants in the game itself. So
Yeah.
I don't know if they had a limited number of players to choose from or if that was by design, but I thought that was actually really interesting.
I have to feel like it had to be a whole bubble. Well, not a bubble thing, but I'm pretty sure Silver just wants to contain everything, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's why. Because in all honesty, Joe Ayerhurst probably should have been there.
Oh yeah.
Duncan Robinson probably should have been there. That's what I'm saying when it comes to snipers. Like,
Right.
these are the guys. This is kind of what their show is, but I get it. We're trying to keep it there. And then the All-Star game happened. I was really bored. Like, because you know why? Because I don't think those guys wanted to be there either. And they're just, and by the time you realize Durant's team was down by 20 something plus, they had to score 44 points to the other team's 24. I'm like, this game's pretty much over, right? It is funny seeing Dame just end the rest of them and realizing that that man just needs to cross half court just to make a shot on you, which, it's funny because they're messing around, but I'm pretty sure if this was a real NBA playoffs game, like, he would do the same thing if he had to, which should delight and anger coaches all around the world. Giannis, I mean, the bank was open. I don't get it. Like, where's this Giannis during, the regular season making these
Absolutely.
threes? So
Let me say this, and I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought. I would imagine that Dame and Steph Curry are probably the most dangerous 21 players that you could probably think of, right? Just the very fact that these guys can hit from anywhere on the floor is just amazing to me. But I thought the most interesting wrinkle was actually the fact that Dame hit that shot with Paul George on his team, and knowing that Dame hit that shot to end Paul George a couple years back, right, and actually forced Paul George to actually go back and rethink and say, you know what, maybe that wasn't such a bad shot because of the guy who actually was taking it. So, I mean, to have to go back and reassess yourself from a couple years back, it just goes to show Dame is a bad man. He is a bad, bad man.
Yeah, he is. And it's funny that Curry and Dame were like, oh, you made that, I'll make this. And they were making him. So I think one of the funniest and saddest plays I saw last night was when LeBron James, I guess they stole the ball or something, but then LeBron James like bounces the ball up as an alley-oop to Gobert, and I'm all like, it was so funny because it was so uninteresting. Like to watch Gobert just get the ball and just dunk it. I'm all like, huh. I mean, I'm very glad you're an all-star because you deserve it, but you ain't flashy. It's like him, Kawhi's all like, oh, are we really playing now? Okay, I guess I can show up and start doing those things. And so last year with that introduction, I thought was pretty cool to, not only about winning a quarter and getting all those HBCUs like donations, that really goes to a good thing, even though if you're a college that was on Durant's, the funding on Durant's side, you should be a little pissed because he didn't win any quarter. He got the minimum of what the donation was, right? It wasn't even like past the minimum. He just got the minimum. But yeah, I think this was a really weird year to have an all-star game. Not a lot of those people wanted it. It would have been a good reset for everybody to just be home for this week.
Right.
And get ready for the second half of the season.
Was the game any worse for not having Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons?
No, I think it still would have been the same game. I mean,
sure.
It would have been the same one. I mean, the only cool thing is I'm pretty sure Embiid would have been trying to chuck threes as far as Curry and then, trying to outpass Jokic at some point. But that wouldn't make or break how I watch the game. It's it's hard because as a kid, I love these all-star games. But as an adult, I realize it's just an exhibition. I really realize they're not really playing for anything. They're just playing because we voted them in or, they were getting recognized. And so to have stakes in a game, that's why last year was actually really interesting, even though the ending was complete shit. You shouldn't end on a free throw, but I get it. It was much more fun because it was really competitive. This year just wasn't competitive. And I think a lot of it is due to it being a year in the pandemic.
Year in a pandemic and just general disinterest and apathy from the players. I mean, like you mentioned, LeBron James played, I think, 11 minutes yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. He was 2 of 7, his lowest scoring in a playoff. In a All-Star game ever. Yeah, I mean, Durant barely played as well. I mean, you had some guys look interested, again, like Dame and Steph, trying to build their brands and show they belong. But these guys, they just didn't give a shit, man. And what I also found, really interesting as well is just the number of points that they had to score. Like you said, I mean, they had to score 44 points just to even like make the game interesting. And it was just like physically impossible. So like the game is already predetermined. What's the point even watching the game, right? And you were starting the score every single quarter, but you have a cumulative score on the top corner as well. It's tired. They got to do something about the All-Star weekend, man. I mean, right? Yesterday was, I don't think, a good look at all for the NBA.
What I will say is, even though I was iffy with the slam dunk contest, I think it's actually very smart to actually have the slam dunk contest
at halftime.
Because it's like, it's very concentrated. You could probably do the other games some other time. It's funny, your brother sent me the rosters between the US and the world team on Instagram, and I'm just like, why would we even play this game? Like, this is the one year where I'm all like, this world team is disgustingly bad relative to the US team. But I digress. As we move on from the All-Star game, we are now looking for the second half of the season. A couple of things come up as we talk about contenders, things like that. So let's talk about a couple of transactions. It is finally official. Blake Griffin is a New Jersey Net, something that I kind of predicted. Just saying that they kind of needed, kind of reliable for, but that's neither here nor there. Blake's on there. Just to let you guys know, audience, when it happened, your boy John here told me he's putting 1,000 curses on the Nets. How do you feel about Blake going on through the team?
It's ultimately frustrating to me because although I don't think he makes a huge difference, I mean, I feel that there was already a foregone conclusion that this team is going to win the championship. But like, it's the rich getting richer, and I imagine that this is how a lot of people felt about LeBron James's team getting better players as well. And so I guess I'm just kind of throwing some of the salt that came my way back out to Kevin Durant. And so, what's just really interesting to me is, I was actually just watching this video on YouTube by Thinking Basketball. Guy has an absolutely fantastic channel about basketball players, guys at their peak. He had episodes about, of course, Bird, Magic, LeBron, Michael, Kobe. He did one about Kevin Durant recently at his peak. And I guess what I'm getting at here is like Kevin Durant in his 14 years in the league now has played with an elite point guard every single year he's been in the NBA, whether it was Russell Westbrook, whether it was Stephen Curry, whether it was now Kyrie Irving. And it's just like the amount of talent this guy has on his team throughout his entire career, and yet he only has 2 titles, to me is really, really surprising. Golden State notwithstanding, I mean, they had them on the ropes, right? They had them on the ropes back in 2016, and they still couldn't get it done, right? I mean, of course, Clay went thermonuclear in Game 6, but he's had so much talent on his team, and he just needs all the talent to coalesce on his team in order to make sure he stacks the cards against everyone else's favor.
I'm not going to curse the Nets because they still got to learn how to play together. Well, I will say for Blake, this is a very smart business decision. Only if he understands that he has to, and I think this is the same thing with Carmelo Anthony. That's why I think he's thriving as the Blazers, is that like he has to go in understanding that you're option 5 or 6 at this point, right? You're coming off the bench. You got to be kind of like that microwavable scorer that they kind of need. I don't think you're going to be playing like crazy minutes, but I could be wrong, right? In 2019, this guy still made the 3rd NBA team. And then last year, it's just, he hit like this wall, right? And to me, I just can't tell if it's injuries or if it's he's not trying, or like we talked about before, athletically speaking, he's not there anymore. So what can he do, right? Mm-hmm. Blake Griffin shooting threes is not the Blake Griffin that I think can be something you can maximize.
Agreed.
But if he's the one that's running pick and rolls, he's still diving to the basket, layups, because he is an underrated passer. I think he can help them a lot. Is he going to push them over the top? No, I think the Nets are kind of a little bit already there. but it's just the rich getting richer a little bit. But that being said, there's a couple names that are floating around. Runner up to the skills challenge, Nikola Vukovic, right? He's being rumored right now that the NBA, the Spurs, the Heat, the Celtics, with the Celtics, by the way, is in every single rumor right now. So,
of course,
great PR job by Ainge and them. And the Hornets, they're really interested in Vukovic. Now, you're Orlando's GM. Do you try to trade Vukovic, who has 2 years left on his contract, to one of these teams to get pieces, or do you stick with him?
The Orlando Magic, I don't know what to really say about that franchise. I'm not really a huge fan of the owners of that franchise to begin with, the DeVos family. I can't really tell what they're trying to actually do, right? Vucevic puts up some really good numbers, as we saw yesterday in the skills challenge. The man is immensely talented. Were I the owner or the GM of the team, of course, you got to pick up the phone when someone's calling, because if you can get some sort of deal that puts you into some sort of normalcy or brings you out of mediocrity, you've actually got to take something. But I don't think he's at a risk for leaving, because they have his bird rights, right? In the event that he ends up leaving, who's going to pay him a big deal? The Magic will, because they have no choice other than to do so. So I think that the cards are kind of in their favor right now, and they don't need to actually move on from him if they can't get the deal they want, right? I mean, because honestly, like, what do you need on that team? Markelle Fultz went out. Jonathan Isaac went out. Aaron Gordon is out, right? So, I mean, you have a guard, a forward, and a center, power forward / center all out. What are you going to replace him with, right? This team isn't going anywhere. So just go ahead and hang on to him. I don't know. I couldn't see them making that trade, but I'm wrong a lot. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm with you. If I was the Orlando GM, unless someone gives me a haul, right? And
yeah,
think about it this way. Like, let's talk about the 4 teams that do need a center. The Heat. Giving me Tyler Hero isn't going to cut it. You weren't willing to trade Tyler Hero for James Harden. What makes you think that I want it for Vukovic at this point, right?
Right.
It's just, you're not going to give me enough to kind of want to do that. This would be just, and I would assume the rivalry between the Heat and the Magic are kind of still there. Probably not, but that type of thing. The Spurs, I'm not taking old man LaMarcus at this point. Just to talk about it, right? So who do you have? The Celtics and the Hornets are a little bit interesting. It just depends on what pieces they kind of give up, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Celtics, at least in my mind, Jaylen Brown's a non-starter. He has to come in that package. But I don't think Ainge wants to break up Brown and Tatum at that point. And if you're the Hornets, does a package of Rozier, Devontae Graham picks actually sound good to you? And Bismack Biyombo? Ugh.
No.
Right? So if I'm Orlando, I'm keeping him because there's nothing that you guys can offer me. And it looks like, I mean, unless, Vukovic has been very quiet about it, it doesn't seem like he's not interested, like wanting to leave, right?
Exactly.
I see potential where they're going with the Magic. I think Fournier, outside of him having back spasms this year, has been doing really well for that team. I think that team can grow. I think that team can be very good at some point. I mean, this man is like 18th in the league in scoring right now. I think he's top 5 in field goal percentage right now as well. Actually, top 10. But the man's, I wouldn't trade him. Not right now, especially in a league that values big men that can score both in the paint and outside and can be a facilitator. Like, it's a high bargain.
How interesting. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Johnny. Please finish your thought and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say. It's just, the man's 30, right? Yeah. So he's entering the prime or at least descending a little bit, but still, like, we're at a point where this league are trying to look for big men that can score inside and outside and be playmakers as well. And it's one of a kind. You would have to give me a lot to give up Vukovic.
Absolutely. And how I was just going to lament, or just not lament, but just mention how interesting, they mentioned the death of the big man all these years ago. Roy Hibbert got played out of the NBA. Andrew Bynum got played out of the NBA. Jahlil Okafor, a relatively young guy, more or less got played out of the NBA, 5 or 6 teams in 5 or 6 years. And yet we're seeing like this resurgence of these extremely talented big men, the Kristaps Porzingis of the world, the Vucevic's of the world, the Jokic's and the Embiids of the world. It's just super, super interesting just to see you have these guys who are 6'10", 6'11", who just have these incredible skills, great touch, incredible vision, still pretty good defensive players as well, can score near the basket. I find it really interesting that, people talked about how the big man was dead for so long. And yet here we are. Like you just said, Johnny, they run the league. Anthony Davis, if you don't have a serviceable or a good big man on your team, you're not winning a championship.
Speaking of big men, Andre Drummond is still out there. He was kind of the first one they were talking to, but we don't know if the Cavs are trying to trade him or they're going to buy him out just yet. Lakers are very interested right now, and they have him, as from what reports said, a little bit more interested in him than they do DeMarcus Cousins, which by all means should be, right? We talk about centers, how they're very important to this game in terms of what they can do if they expand their game to this league. If Drummond does come to the Lakers, does that change your way in how you think about them going against the Nets if they make it to the finals?
Yes. The reason being is because I don't have the same confidence in this Laker team this year that I did last year, just because the big men they have this year versus last, you have a stark difference. Last year, I know he's a meme player, but you had JaVale McGee, you had Dwight Howard, right? And you lost both of them for essentially Marc Gasol, a guy who comes in, gives you 20 minutes a night, can barely hit a shot at the rim. He can make a shot from the outside every once and again, but he's not necessarily giving them everything they need. They lost a lot of athleticism. And if they're able to bring in a guy like Andre Drummond, especially for more or less nothing, right? Then you're basically backing up Anthony Davis. So you have two ADs in the front court. You have a much better rebounding team. You have a much better defensive team. And you have a guy who can just go up there and get it. Like, I don't know if you ever, I mean, of course, Johnny, you've watched Andre Drummond, but when he plays against small teams, that man feasts. He may be inefficient. He may have had the highest usage rate for a guy who's as inefficient as he is, but that's because he wants to get the hell out of Cleveland. Who doesn't want to get out of Cleveland, right? But the man, he absolutely feasts, and he has such a nose for the ball. He reminds me a lot of like a Moses Malone, like a guy who could just get you 20 and 20 every single night, right? So he can completely change the complexion and the direction and the trajectory of the Lakers.
Yeah, it's funny. This is the group chat. Both Andy and Joe, friends of the podcast here, talked about Drummond, and they think he's an empty double-double stat line, which, as of right now, he is. I think he can change because I told him there's another person that used to be an empty double-double, and that was Zach Randolph. But once he got into a team that actually understands how to utilize it when he was in the Grizzlies, his double-doubles make sense. I think Drummond can actually change a lot of it. He has to tamper down something. And he has the most ridiculous usage rate when he was in Cleveland. He's not going to have that same usage rate when he comes to another team, at least to a contender. But that's actually good because there will be structure depending on where he wants to go. And I think within the Lakers system, I think that structure will be there. And I think the biggest thing, like you mentioned, is that the biggest benefit out of all the players is going to be Anthony Davis, because for some reason, that man does not want to play the 5 spot. Whatever. We'll give it to you now, right?
Well,
and this is kind of what it is.
There's a reason for it, right? It's because, and I mean, this is basically me doing shitty, medical. But Anthony Davis he's 6'10", 6'9". He grew 8 inches in college. He used to be a guard, right? He has the mobility of a guy who is 8 inches smaller than him because he used to be a guard, and because of that, his body is so used to being able to move in certain ways, but his weight, the physical weight on his body can't keep up with the amount of weight, you know what I mean? With the moves he's trying to make. Yeah. And so he's injury prone because of that. So 100% AD would be the benefactor of that. I'll go back to what you mentioned about the boys though, too. Who are they comparing him to with regard to him, empty stats guys? Because there's empty stats guys on nearly every team. Correct. If you bring Andre Drummond to this team, he's no longer the man, right? He doesn't have to go out there and score 20 points a game. He goes out there and you get you 20 rebounds just because he can, right? He's playing behind AD and playing behind LeBron. I mean, that's the perfect position for him. And you can't tell me he's not an upgrade from Dwight, right? It's
funny because it's just one of those things where like they were trying to justify Marc Gasol at the beginning of the year, and I'm like, it's like he's old. I think he's there to do the passing, right? But I don't think he's relative to what JaVale was going to give. He would have been a wash. And now everyone's disappointed because he's not playing like Grizzlies Marc Gasol. I'm all like, Johnny, this is the thing about Laker fans, man. I'm telling you, like, It's just one of those things that really irks me, is because they like elevate whoever they sign so high, and I'm all like,
right.
why?
That's right. And let me tell you what it is. It's they don't want to get their hopes up. So they're putting him down because they don't want to get their hopes up, because if the expectations change if you get a player of his caliber, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's just that's probably the major element of that. But you are correct. I mean, Lakers fans, of which now I do count myself, because I follow LeBron James. We think we can get anybody, right? Just because of where we are. And a lot of times we're right. I mean, history has kind of been on that side, right? Like people want to play in LA just because it's a happening place to live. Obviously you're up in LA now, right?
Yeah.
It's a happening place to be. It's a great organization, and they win titles, right? No other team has won as many titles as them in the last 10 years.
Exactly. Too bad. I guess everyone wants to go to Brooklyn right now. So,
yeah, that's true. That's true. But I mean, but everyone wants to go to Brooklyn because everyone wants to win a ring now. Everyone wants to be a Laker because being in LA is the cool place to be.
As we get out of all that, I want to bring back to kind of like our second episode where we're doing kind of predictions when it came to end of the year, what we expect. Since this is the second season, we're going to recalibrate. We're going to think about a couple things. Let's talk about a couple of the awards first. I think we can all agree. I mean, maybe we don't agree. Defensive Player of the Year. It's still going to be Gobert, right? I mean, do you see anyone beating him in that award right now?
There's a guy out there who I think you're pretty high on that I think could at the very least have some claim to fame on that. Embiid. I mean, that guy's playing out of his damn mind right now.
He is. Seeing how successful Utah is, which, I will apologize on the front end. I just didn't think they had the offensive firepower that they're playing at right now to keep up with their defensive intensity. But since they have, this is kind of like Gobert's award to lose. But I do agree, Embiid has been playing out of his mind right now, and he wants to prove everyone last year wrong about, and it's funny because if that bounce didn't go the other way, I'm pretty sure everyone's not going to be ragging on Embiid, but since it went in, right, it's kind of one of or 2 years ago, I mean, it kind of changed the directory of how we view Embiid as of right now, but that man's is on a mission right now to change how everyone looks at him.
Two things. Now, I don't mean to interrupt you, Johnny. The first of which is it's helpful for Utah to have a healthy Bogdanovich. One,
yes.
It's also helpful for Utah to have a Mike Conley who actually is playing up to his contract. Two,
yes,
and it's also extremely helpful that Donovan Mitchell and both Gobert are playing up to their contracts as well. I mean, Donovan Mitchell, as we all saw in the bubble last year versus the Nuggets, I mean, the guy was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, he literally outplayed Jamal Murray, who was probably one of the best players in the bubble, right?
Yes.
And so he came back and he brought it. But let me say this too about Embiid. That I mean, and you bring up that game, so I actually want to kind of talk about that for a second. Kawhi takes that shot. We all saw the pose, Kawhi kind of squatting in the corner, waiting to see what that ball is going to do and go in. And we see Embiid kind of just looking over his shoulder like, oh, shit, I hope that ball doesn't go in. And what happened at the end of that game? We saw Embiid's face. We saw the raw emotion and just disappointment that he had in his face. And so I want to give it to him. I want to hand it to him right now just because the man cares. He gives a shit about his sport and about his craft and about his team. And to be where he is right now in terms of improving his game, I mean, he like you just said, we're changing how we actually are viewing him. He's not just a goofy guy anymore, like Dwight Howard. Like the guy's out there putting in work.
Rookie of the Year, I thought it was going to be Weissman. I think you thought it was going to be Anthony Edwards, which I think he's in the consideration. But LaMelo Ball is in the lead, right?
He's running. He's running away with this. But I will say this though too. There's another player that I think is going to be very, very good for a long time. On the Sacramento Kings, Tyrese Halliburton. They got a stud in that kid.
Yeah, him with De'Aaron Fox is actually going to be very good within the future, whatever they decide to do, which probably means they got to move Barnes or Hield at some point. But yeah, Halliburton I'm very high on. He's been having a fantastic year there. One of the things that Luke Walton has not effed up, so much to his grin, Then we think about six man. Like I said, this is a runaway, right? It is Jordan Clarkson. It's no one else. or am I missing somebody?
Okay, this is what I want to say. Where was this Jordan Clarkson in 2018? I mean,
Oh,
this dude he's unbelievable right now.
When you think about that Lakers core, young core that they had to break up,
Right,
to get LeBron, when we really analyze that core as of right now, I would tell you it is a toss-up between D'Angelo Russell and Lonzo Ball as the people that are not fulfilling their potential. Now, I'm going to give Nance a pass because he's hurt, which some people might not, but think about it. Clarkson's gone. That guy's a stud.
Bi
Ingram's gone. That guy's a stud. Lonzo Ball, he's having a fine. He's not better than his brother, but he's doing fine. D'Angelo Russell, he just had one. Josh Hart is the heart of that team. He just hustles.
Julius Randle
plays so well. Julius Randle is having a breakout year as well. So everybody that has left that team has done wonders. And the fact that D'Angelo Russell might be the worst one, sans Nance,
that says a lot.
It's actually kind of says a lot, right?
That says a lot. Let me ask you this. You take all those guys that you just mentioned, Randall, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, D'Lo, and Jordan Clarkson. You put them all on one team today in the year 2021. Is that a playoff team in today's NBA in the Western Conference?
Yes.
Yes?
Simply because you always need that go-to scorer, and the fact that you have now Ingram and Randall fulfilling their potential, right? It's funny because I feel like taking crazy pills. Like I don't know where this Randall only had one move when he was in LA, man. Like all he did was spin to the left. Well, now he can spin to the right, right? So he can do two things. And Ingram was just a flat out scorer. And I think that's the only thing I will say again here that Luke Walton has done, if any importance as a coach, is that he let during that rookie year Ingram try to be the point guard, and it's kind of taught him how to be a facilitator and be a really good ball handler. We're just seeing more out of it now with Stan Van Gundy pushing it to the next level. They're not going to win. They're not going to win anything, right? But I do think they can make the playoffs.
I just would like to remind the listeners that team is collectively below 500 right now. If you include the records for the Timberwolves, the Knicks, the Pelicans, and the only team that's above 500 is the best team in the NBA, which was the Utah Jazz. I just want to put that out there for the listeners.
I mean, all I'm saying is that Minnesota skews that off. If we took Minnesota out of this, and we took Cleveland kind of out of this, I'm pretty sure the record would have been fine. I'm just saying.
Didn't we talk about most disappointing teams in one of our pods recently where we talked about the Pelicans? The Pelicans is one of the most disappointing teams right now, man. They got to get it together.
They do got to get it together.
And they beat the Jazz, and then they lost to the Bulls. I mean, come on, man.
This ain't on Stan as well. I'm telling you guys right now, this is more on the players at this point. They just, and it's funny because I was telling you, after that win against the Jazz, I'm like, they needed that. They blew a big lead, but they learned how to hang on. And then they lead a dud against the Bulls. The Bulls are not good. like Zach LaVine, someone needs to rescue that guy and get him out of there, right?
Yes, they did.
So Clarkson, 6-man, I think that's pretty.
Yes,
lock.
Lock.
I'm pretty sure if we talk about most improved, there's a couple candidates out there, but I'm pretty sure Julius Randle has this at this point. That guy is producing at a level that he's producing at a top 10 fantasy level, which, is not something that everyone wants to critique, but the fact that that man is providing that much value for this team, being the go-to scorer, and he's Thibodeau, which, God, I really hope my prediction is right with them making the playoffs because the Knicks are just skating by right now. But I mean, the fact that he is trusting that guy on offense and defense, right? Because if this was the Tibbs I knew in Chicago, that guy would be benched during the fourth quarter. But he's letting him learn how to play through. And they don't have Mitchell Robinson, so it's not like they have a safety valve, because that's what Mitchell Robinson usually is. But they're just kind of letting them learn, and I'm very happy to kind of see that for Julius Randle.
Let the record show that for the readers that Johnny does wear glasses, as do I, and the tint on those glasses right now are rose shaded. So I just want to put that out there right now. I although I agree with you that Julius Randle definitely is in contention for MIP. I would also say just as much. So is Jordan Clarkson, right? Why not win 2 awards? Right?
I agree with that.
Six man of the year and most improved. I mean, like we mentioned a moment ago, this guy is a part of a winning culture, a part of a winning team. They put him on the bench and they said, look, this is what we need from you. We need you to come into the game. And we need you to run the offense. And we need you to do what we need you to do, which is to score the basketball. And he's doing that in spades right now. And I mentioned that they are benefiting from the fact that they finally have a healthy team. But at the same time, the fact that they're getting this kind of production out of a guy who nobody expected that kind of production out of, right? To me, on a consistent basis, to me, is just something that you actually have to recognize him for. And you're right, Johnny, he's probably going to win the 6th man of the year unless he just completely just has a crappy second half of the year. And it is Julius's, it's his to lose.
That gets us the MVP. I think when we talked about it in the beginning of the year, I think you had LeBron winning this year, and I had Damian Lillard. Would you change that vote right now if we're going into the second half and we have to project?
Considering what Damian Lillard has done in the last 6 or so games, I have the current pecking order of MVP. I have Joel Embiid. I have, this is going to make Johnny very happy, Jokic, LeBron. I'm sorry, excuse me. Joel, Jokic, Lillard, LeBron. And the reason being is that Lillard has the Blazers, I think, 9 games over 500 right now.
Yes.
With Nurkic being habitually injured as he always is, with CJ McCollum out and available sometimes, with Dame absolutely playing out of his damn mind, scoring 40 and hitting game-winning shots and all kind of crazy stuff. I have Dame ahead of LeBron right now. Now, with that being said, the reason why LeBron has dropped for me is obviously because his running mate has been injured. He can't do it all by himself. He's 36 years old. I think I had made a comment to you a couple weeks ago that as great as Utah was playing, they were still only 1 game ahead of the Lakers at one point in time. And they're about 4 games above the Lakers now. And yeah, that 100% contributes to my having LeBron drop in the voting. But to still be top 5 at 36 in their 18th year is incredible. And who knows what happens when AD gets back, especially if they get Drummond. They turn it all around.
I agree with your assessment. I still am holding out hope that I think Dame is going to win, even though, right now my pecking orders, it's just flipped a little bit. I have Jokic 1, Embiid 2, Dame at 3. It's just Dame is doing so much with,
so little.
Really, he's so little. Like, yeah. CJ has been gone for a month now, maybe a month and a half. It's going to get close to 2 months, but I think he'll be back in a couple weeks. We don't know when Nurkic is coming back. Cantor has been a very good fill-in. Gary Trent Jr. is starting to be a sniper, right? Mm-hmm. But that team is decimated, and Dame is just keeping them on float. And I think if this team makes top 4, which I think they have a really good shot, if they get the top 4 seed or even they get to the 3rd seed, then the only reason why Embiid would win the MVP is because they have him in the top 2 seed, right? At this point, I think it's the team jockeying to see where they at finish to kind of get the votes. But I think one of these 3 guys is going to win between Embiid, Jokic, and Lillard. It's just, to me, kind of like the clear runaways as the top 3 right now.
So here's a question that I'm going to pose to you as well. And this goes to seeding because seeding matters for MVP winners. Right now, you have Utah 1. They're about 2.5 games ahead because they lost a couple. I want to say 2 out of 3. Then you have Phoenix in second place right now. Now they are artificially a bit higher by percentage points because they did have a couple of games they missed because of COVID. They have to make those up sometime in the back end. You also have the Clippers in 3. And then you have the Lakers at 4, again, because of percentage points. And they have a half game up on the Lakers because they won the first meeting. Now, with that being said, you're saying that if you think that if Portland can sneak into the top 4, so my question to you is, who's dropping out of that?
Phoenix.
You think Phoenix drops out?
Phoenix will drop.
Okay.
I think Utah doesn't. I think the Clippers will actually vault to probably number 2, if I'm being honest with myself about this. Because even though AD will probably come back in the next couple weeks, we really won't see a really healthy AD for another month. And so they're just going to trial with it, right? And so I see the Lakers dropping to 4. I mean, hopefully, people like Kuzma, THT, KCP,
KCP,
Schroeder.
KCP, where are you, man? Where are you?
This man is just, so to me, it's like we'll kind of see where it kind of goes. But I do see Phoenix making the playoffs, being a top 5 team. I just don't. I think they're going to hit a wall. Chris Paul is going to make sure they don't, but they got to learn kind of through it, right? So that kind of leads us to our last point, which is what we predicted the NBA Finals is going to be. John had the Lakers over the Nets, right? I believe in the first, and I had the Lakers beating the Heat. I'm going to start with this. I'm going to revise this because as much as I love the Heat, because I love Jimmy Butler, I think everyone's starting to realize that Jimmy Butler, we talked about a little before, Bam and Hero were having very good seasons individually, but they weren't winning games. And when Butler comes back, we realize who the glue is out of all this. But that glue can't help Jimmy Butler's back. I don't know about his back. Like, his back is always in pain. That guy's not... I love the guy because he's going to play through it. Doesn't mean I'm going to get 100% of what he is. I like the leaps from Duncan Robinson, but I'm going to readjust this. I do think the Nets are the clear favorite. I think there's only 2 teams that can kind of beat them in the East. One of them is Philadelphia because I think defensively, Simmons can kind of stay with Durant. Durant's still going to line him up, but I think he can. I think Toby can somewhat stay with Harden, even though I think he's going to probably get bullied. I don't know if the guards there is going to stay with Kyrie, right? But they are not going to have an answer for Embiid. So really just, Tybull, right? So for me, I don't think anyone's going to stop Embiid on the Nets. My question really is as I'm thinking it through, is there actually not anyone, can Tobias show me that he can show up during a playoff game? Because this man is a great regular season guy. It's just when it comes to the playoffs, for some reason, he just shrinks a little bit. And they're going to need him to be the second scorer on that team when they eventually will play the Nets. The only other team I can also think on the East that can beat them is the Bucks. I just don't think that Giannis is good enough to carry them offensively through it, because what they really should be doing is playing it, utilizing more Chris Middleton at this point. But they're going to live and die with Giannis, right? So I think the Nets right now are probably going to beat, and I hate this, because in my mind will change if the Lakers get Drummond, but if they don't get Drummond, then the Nets are going to beat the Jazz. But I also think the Jazz has the best chance of stopping the Nets, because defensively, they cover all the bases. I just don't know if this offensive firepower that we've seen will kind of continue through. I'm gonna eat this bandwagon. I'm gonna jump on the bandwagon of the Jazz. I'm very astounded about how good offensively they are this year. I just hope that it kind of keeps translating, because I know their defense is going to be there. I just don't know offensively. So I'm rearranging what my prediction is. I do think the Nets are going to beat the Jazz, but I hope I'm wrong.
I have a couple of points that I want to make here. The first of which is when it comes to the Nets, when it is do or die in a game, who are going to be the 5 guys on the floor? So, of course, you got KD. Of course, you have Kyrie. Of course, you have James Harden. So you got 3 guys there. Who are going to be your other 2 guys on the floor? Is it going to be Jeff Green? Is it going to be DeAndre Jordan? Is it going to be Joe Harris? Will it be Blake, Brown, baby? Will it be Blake Griffin, right? Or Bruce Brown, who's having a phenomenal season, right? That guy's jacked, by the way.
Yes.
But so who's going to be the 5 guys on the floor in the playoffs when it comes down to it? I think that's a question that the Nets actually need to answer for themselves, because the game is different in the playoffs. And we know that Kyrie and KD can get buckets because they are isolation players, as is James Harden. But I'm really still curious to see what happens with that defense, especially if they end up having to rely on a Joe Harris or rely on a Blake Griffin, if those are the 2 guys rounding out the 5 for them. So that's one. The second thing you just mentioned about Utah, I can't say that I'm quite a believer just yet. I've seen this happen many times before. You have this amazing regular season team. They do all these things, and they break these records, and right now the records that Utah is breaking is the 3-pointers. They are hitting at a historical clip, even more so than these Warriors teams with Splash Brothers. However, we know that once the playoffs start, open three pointers start to dry up. Do they continue to hit these 3-pointers and when guys can actually game plan for them? This year has provided a very unique insight for the fans of the NBA, just because this year, for the very first time, we've had series, right, in the regular season, just to kind of curb the spread of COVID. So you've had a chance to see teams kind of adjust for each other. But we know, you and I know, having watched Pop and Carlisle and just really great coaches, they don't show everything in the regular season, right? Because they want to save something for potential matchups. So I'd be curious to see if Utah gets these great looks in the postseason as well. I'm not going to say they can't do it, but I just want to say I'm curious to see if they actually can do it. My last point, and it goes to the Bucks. If I'm the Bucks, I'm sandbagging this year. Giannis, look. Giannis got his money. Middleton got his money. You've got Drew Holiday under contract. You need to get rid of Budenholzer. Get him out of there. I'm going to say this again. Get him out. Sandbag that, Giannis. Let them go.
Oh, man. I mean, we'll kind of see how that goes, right? I just want to say this about, I'm very impressed with a lot of the coaching that's going on in the NBA right now, just of how they adapt. I just want to remind people, and a lot of these people are Laker fans, that as much as we're seeing success from Frank Volt, Quinn Snyder could have been the head coach of the Lakers. All right. I want you guys to think about this because he was an assistant there for 2 years, or I think like a season and a half. He went to Moscow for like 1 year. And then he was on Budenholzer's staff the year after, the Hawks team that was really good. And then after that, he got the Jazz job. Quinn Snyder, man, he's no nonsense Wall Street looking guy that's coaching, right? But I think he matches what Utah is doing really well. But yeah, I'm a believer in this team. I didn't think I would be. Knowing what we did last year about hearing all these tea leaves about Mitchell doesn't want to play with Gobert because of the whole COVID thing is dragging his name. Now when watching him play, I'm all like, who mended this fence, or was that ever like something that actually happened, right? They look like they're hitting on all cylinders. The fact that they have a 6th man of the year, the fact that they have Mike Conley that's actually playing like what we expected him to do when he was coming from Memphis. Gobert you just can't get into the paint. Like, it's a chore to score in the paint against that guy. And Donovan Mitchell is just transcending to where we think of what superstars in this league are. He's not there just yet, but we can see his rise right now. And and then you got people like Joe Ingles, right? I keep forgetting you have people like that, like Royce O'Neal. Like, they have great complement players
Derek Favors
to do that. It's just like, and I want to believe they can beat this Nets team because I think they can. It's just that this league is very dominated by superstars.
That's right.
And it's 3 to 1.5. It is, right? when we really narrow it down, it's just 3 of them are on one side. You got Mitchell and you got Gobert. I'm giving him a half because defensively he is a superstar. Offensively, that guy's trash. All you do is just dunk. So we'll see how that kind of goes. So, but we have a lot of the second half of the season coming out, and I just want to say, you guys, like, we're really excited because we're ramping up, and then we're getting to playoffs. Like we talked about earlier in the podcast, we're changing to kind of a bi-weekly because we'll have episodes like this. But then the next episode you hear, we're going to start doing a lot of the coaching. Fantasy drafts is something that we kind of like to do. We're going to do it in a little bit smaller format. And so we have a couple cool guests that are coming on. Next episode, my uncle, very big Laker fan. We're actually going to do him versus me, drafting players have played for the LA teams in this area. And John's going to be the moderator. And we're going to kind of switch and do these things from time to time as we kind of continue along. So hopefully you guys are staying along with us and joining us for the ride for all this because, we're having fun doing this here and just getting our voices heard out in the land of all these podcasts that are happening. So, John, let us know where they can find us.
You guys can find us at Couchin Courtside on Twitter. For Johnny, you can catch him at JNo11, JNo11 on Twitter, and me, JSpeed04. Additionally, you guys can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well, and Google Podcasts, or any of your other favorite podcast catchers. So please do check us out. We really appreciate it. We love you guys' feedback as well, and we want to make sure we make this as awesome as possible for you guys.
Cool. Until then, you guys, we'll see you next time. I'll see you guys.
Peace.